Welcome everyone to this week's video. Today we are on Fish Friday number 81 and we have a good one for you today. Today's fish is a fish that is not very well known. I'm going to be honest, I didn't really know too much about this fish at all. But I have heard of the group of fish that belongs to. And I have to say it's a very interesting group of fish and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Today's fish that we're going to be talking about is... Bam! The sand tilefish. So the sand tilefish, or scientific name Malacanthus plumieri. Again, that is Malacanthus plumieri. It is part of the family Malacanthidae, which is the family of tilefish. There you go. It's not a very uniform family. It's got two separate subfamilies that differ very wildly in their body shape. But we're going to be talking about this particular fish, which its group in that family does have the same body shape. Now, the sand tilefish is found in the western Atlantic Ocean. Think North Carolina, so midway up the eastern U.S. seaboard, all the way down to Bermuda. That's kind of its northern end of its range. And then it's found all along the Gulf of Mexico down to Brazil and Uruguay. So it can go quite a ways down the South American coast. So essentially how you can think about it is, think of the equatorial western Atlantic Ocean. That's where you can seem to find these. Like many fish that we've talked about in the over this channel, it can be found kind of at any depth. They've been found anywhere from 3 to 153 meters, which is between 10 and 502 feet. And I even found some records of them being photographed at 700 feet deep, which would be another 50 meters, I believe. So 200 meters, 250 meters-ish. So, really found it interesting, but they're always found close to the seafloor. They're mostly found shallow. I should mention that they're mostly found around that 20-meter depth, which, is 70 feet, which is not really that shallow, but that's pretty shallow when you think about the entire ocean. But they are always found near the bottom, and that is because this is a benthic inhabitant. It is found on the ocean floor. It depends on the ocean floor to survive. It's primarily found on the sand or small pebbles. If you can see, like this sand substrate here, that's where you'd expect to find it. And in fact, if you look at all of the pictures besides, the ones where they've been caught, they're found over like this sand, gravel, rubble sort of substrate. But they're also found close to reefs and to seagrass. They really like to be close to some sort of structure. They're not just found on a sand plain. They really like to be close to like grass or reefs, bigger rocks, things like that. They really depend on those for cover as well. Now, it is a long fish, but it's not a very heavy fish or big fish. It's not thick body, if you can't tell from the picture. It has a maximum length of about 70 centimeters, which is about 28 inches. But usually they're found more around the 50 centimeters, so 20 inches, so just under 2 feet long. And they're really light. They can weigh up to about 1 kilogram, which is about 2 pounds. So they're not heavy. They're not thick bodied. They're just really long. And they're not cigar shaped. They're slightly compressed. So, something else, they have this really elongated head. They're pretty rounded, these large eyes, which that's pretty indicative of these shallow reef fish. They're using their eyes to see, look for food, look for predators. They're looking for potential mates, things like that. Something that you can't really tell from these pictures, so I did find one really close. They do actually have some spines on them. They have this really thick spine right on the back of this gill plate, right there. That's their opercle flap, or opercle plate. So they have this really large, sharp spine. It's very sharp. Something to be aware of, actually, if you are catching these. And they do have spines in their dorsal fins, which we'll get into their finnage in a little bit. But that's the main spine that you're going to be looking at. Very, very large mouth for its body shape, body size, if you haven't already gathered that. And they're mostly kind of this shiny white color with these, if you look really close, you have these really tiny scales. The back looks like it has more of scalage, but that's actually just because the coloration difference. And if you looked at them, they're yellowish, bluish gray, white. They do have a variation in colors. You can see this one, it has more dark, looks more scalish, and then you get over here, it's more yellowish. This one has more of like that rainbowish color on there that some of them have. It's got a pretty variation, pretty varied coloration across the species. They're usually kind of like a yellowish to a bluish gray, yellowish white, that sort of thing. Now they do have an elongated dorsal fin, and they do have an elongated anal fin as well. So like basically their entire body on their top and bottom is basically fin. And the dorsal fin does have spines, I believe 4 spines throughout here. I believe they are on the front. And the anal fin does have 1 spine on it. I'm not entirely sure where the spines are placed, but I do know it's like 4 or 5 on the dorsal fin and 1 on the anal fin. Now, something that is pretty indicative, I don't know if you've been noticing, is it does have this sort of yellow bar. If you kind of look, you can't really tell on this one or on this one, but you notice that there's usually some sort of coloration difference towards the back half of the body, whether it's yellow, darker. You can't tell on this one, but there is some sort of coloration difference that goes on right there. Seems primarily to be a yellowish bar, but it does change. But then it has this really dark blotch on the caudal fin, and it's on the lower part of the upper lobe of the caudal fin. So you can see it here. You can even see it here. This one has these yellow fins, really beautiful, beautiful fins. This one's really striking because it has this very pale color, yellow, and then bam, big black spot. And that spot's going to be an oscillated spot. That's so that predators have a harder time figuring out which part's the head, which part's the tail, because you always want to protect your head. Always want to protect your head. Just a little interesting fact, their caudal fin is called a lunate fin, meaning that it does have sort of a moon shape. Just a little interesting tidbit there. Now they are a pretty voracious feeder. Shrimps, starfish, worms, other fish, amphipods, basically, if it could get in its mouth, it's probably gonna try and eat it if it can catch it. So they seem to really like mantis shrimp. I saw a lot of information about them eating mantis shrimp. So definitely something to be aware of. Now they are caught in a sort of commercial aspect, not much. They're caught as an angling aspect. A couple of pictures, if you go throughout there, you can find people posing with sand tilefish that they've caught. Like this one right here, people do seem to catch them. So that is kind of interesting. And they do occasionally appear in the aquarium trade. I could not find out where their aquarium, I could not find any, basically is what I'm saying. I found a ton of tilefish, but I could not find the sand tilefish. So I can't give you a price on what they would cost. I don't imagine they'd be too terribly difficult to keep as long as you get the substrate right. And the reason why we're going to focus on the substrate is that we're going to talk about in this next part, because we're actually going to talk about the interesting fact that we're going to in the video on. They have to be found on these sand and rubble substrates, because it actually creates mounds of rubble or shell fragments close to the reefs and the beds of seagrass. So it makes a little mound. And it spends long periods just hovering over its mound. just kind of waving its dorsal and anal fins, just hanging out there. They're extremely territorial. Males do not let other male territories overlap, but males do overlap with other females. And I believe it's like 5 to 6 females. But the interesting fact about that, the reason why that the mound, you know, many fish build mounds, why is this one so interesting? Well, the interesting fact about this one is that the sand tilefish, when it gets alarmed, it goes into what you could almost say mole mode. It dives head first into its mound. It's a really loosely packed mound. They're found, you know, they're making these mound underneath rocks, near cover, everything. But when they get startled, they basically just dive heads first into that mound and disappear extremely quickly. I found a couple of videos on those. It's incredible how fast they just disappear. So that's why that's, you know, just a really, really interesting fact on that. I should also note that the mounds play a role in their breeding. They do spawn as pairs. There has been some evidence that they're both polyandrous and monogamous. But basically what happens is a male will approach the female in a really undulating motion, and then they rise up in the water column in a crisscrossing pattern, and then they just swim with the eggs and the milk being released at the top of their swimming, and then they disperse. And I believe that they kind of fall back down to the mound. I wasn't sure. There's not a whole lot known about this fish, actually. As very common, these fish are not endangered in any way. As common as these are, and as much as has been caught, there just hasn't been a whole lot of research done on these. But again, the interesting fact is they go into mole mode. If you scare them, and they're gonna go head first into a mound. So really, really interesting. I should also note something that I did seem to notice. There was a lot of pictures that the fish had this vermiculation pattern on their top of the gill cover. And vermiculation pattern basically means looks like worm tracks, what you'd think worm tracks would look like. So there you go. But thank you guys so much again. I really appreciate it. Hope to see you again. If I don't, please be safe. Have a great day. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. If you do, I'd really appreciate it. Hope to see you again. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your loved ones. And peace.